My name is Inka Cresswell. I'm a wildlife filmmaker, underwater photographer, and marine biologist. And my entire life revolves around our oceans. Throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to explore every type of marine ecosystem. I've spent time diving in our kelp forest right here in the UK, where I've interacted with some of the most playful grey seals, worked with coral reefs in the Indo-Pacific and the Caribbean, where I've worked with teams to plant corals and worked with communities to help to establish marine protected areas. This is essential because it helps us to rebuild those vital ecosystems that not only protect our coastlines from storm erosion, but also support an incredible variety of marine life. I spent time working with sharks all around the world, including coming face to face with great white sharks, and even spent time in the deep sea, working in submarines with ROVs, deep underwater robots that allow us to map new ecosystems never explored before. But in all my journeys around the oceans, I have seen firsthand the impacts of plastics. I started scuba diving when I was just 6 years old, and before then was already out exploring the rock pools, finding all sorts of amazing creatures and snorkeling around my local ecosystems. And the amazing thing about the ocean is that you never know what you're going to find. There's such an incredible variety of life. And the ocean provides us with all sorts of amazing things beyond just adventure. We have the ocean to thank for every second breath that we take because of the oxygen that it provides. It also stores huge amounts of carbon, helping us to fight climate change. In fact, one whale can be the equivalent of 1,000 trees. But despite all the amazing things the ocean does for us, it's at risk. The ocean is impacted by all sorts of things, including climate change, plastic pollution, overfishing, and habitat destruction. If we don't support the life in our oceans and keep our oceans healthy, they start providing us with the things that we need, including protecting our coastlines from storm erosion, providing protein for millions of people around the world, and creating a tourism industry that supports families across the globe. But why are plastics such an issue? Plastics can cause all sorts of risks to marine life. The larger plastics, things like discarded fishing net, plastic bags, and plastic straws, can create entanglement and choking hazards for marine life. While whale watching, I've seen whales wrapped up in fishing line and had to call entanglement services to come and help set them free. And while leading underwater beach cleans, I've spent hours cutting fishing net off of coral reefs and left the water with enormous bags filled to the brim with plastics that we have put into our oceans. It is essential that we remove as much of the plastic in our oceans as possible so that it doesn't enter the food chain and create a bigger risk for marine life. But it's not just the plastics we can see that create an issue. Every plastic that has ever been created still exists today, but heated by the sun and impacted by wave energy and rolled up onto the beaches in storms and then pulled back into the ocean, it gets broken down over and over and over again until these big plastics, like a plastic bag or a plastic cup or a plastic water bottle, slowly become hundreds and hundreds of tiny little microplastics. One of my favorite species to work with in the ocean are manta rays. They are gentle giants, and when they hear your bubbles scuba diving on the reef, they will race over to see you and bathe in your bubbles, and they're just the most incredible creatures to spend time with. But they are at significant risk from those microplastics. Despite their enormous size, these giants feed off plankton, tiny little marine organisms. But with all the microplastics that we put into our oceans, they get stirred up with all of their food. And as a result, they end up consuming huge amounts of tiny little plastics. In fact, one manta ray can consume up to 63 pieces of plastic an hour. And the reason why this is such a big problem is because not only do their stomachs get full up on plastic instead of food, but they also act like sponges. Plastics allow marine species to absorb toxic chemicals in our oceans at a much higher rate, putting them at risk of all sorts of other issues. So how do we stop plastic in our oceans? How do we stop these microplastics from forming? And how do we make sure that we are protecting the marine life as best as we possibly can? The answer is it starts at the source. We have to think about the plastics we use in our day-to-day lives and how we can change our day-to-day actions to ensure that less plastic is making its way into the ocean. If we can limit the amount of plastics that we use and we can make a positive impact in our communities, we can reduce the way that it enters these supply chains and ultimately enters the ocean. There are all sorts of things that we can do in our day-to-day lives to help minimize plastics. Simple switches like using a reusable plastic water bottle, taking a reusable bag with us when we go shopping instead of using a plastic bag, or making changes in our lunchbox so that it's a little bit more sustainable and reduces the use of single-use plastics are all great ways to stop that plastic from entering the supply chain. But there's also things we can do to just stop it from entering the oceans. Things like litter picks. If we can collect all the plastic we see around our schools and our communities and make sure that we handle it correctly, reusing and recycling it, that helps to minimize the amount of plastic that's finding its way into the ocean, protecting marine life. Plastic Clever Schools is a fantastic initiative for you to start your journey in protecting our oceans. By hosting assemblies, you can educate others about the impacts of plastic on our oceans, and you can come up with initiatives and campaigns in your own schools and classrooms to ensure that you can reduce the amount of plastic and that all of the plastic that you do use is reused and recycled appropriately.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah from Plastic Clever Schools, and I am so excited to be here with the incredible Inka Cresswell this morning. Good morning, Inka.
Good morning.
Thank you to everyone who has joined us this morning for this live Q&A. I can't wait to ask Inka your questions, so please do put your questions into the chat. And we actually have schools taking part from all over the world today, so if you'd like to, please also tell us where you're joining us from. It'd be great to know. Inka, I really loved learning about your amazing experiences. With such an impressive and varied career, I wondered if there's been a particular highlight or a standout moment that you could tell us a bit more about.
One of my absolutely favourite moments working in the ocean was when I was working with an organisation called the Watermen Project. And I was sent out to a tiny little island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It takes about 2 days to travel to by boat. And what it is it's basically a volcano that's risen out of the ocean. And from underwater, it just looks like this enormous mountain. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. And we were there to tag scalloped hammerhead sharks. And hammerhead sharks are one of my favorite species to work with. They're just so beautiful and very, very cool. And you get big schools of them, up to 50 in the area we were working in. And our job was to go and put these special tracking devices on the back of the shark so that we could see where they were going. And I was scouting the location, so trying to find where the sharks were so I could tell the research team where to go. And as I went down and I was looking for these sharks, I had a pod of dolphins come and surround me.
Wow.
And it was such a special moment. And there was this baby dolphin that was swimming right next to me. And then just as I kind of got to the edge of this drop off, where you're swimming along the coral, a lot like Finding Nemo, all of a sudden the coral kind of drops off and you have big open blue ocean. We saw all the hammerheads swimming past, and it was such a special moment, and really felt like on that day the entire ocean came to say hi.
Oh, wow, that sounds incredible. And seeing the volcano from underwater as well, that's such a unique experience. We've got a question from Westerings Primary School in Southend. Good morning, Westerings. They'd like to know, how long have you known that you wanted to be a marine biologist?
So I was about 5 or 6 when I decided I was going to be a marine biologist, which is ridiculous because I don't think there's a lot of 5 or 6-year-olds that are that set on what they're going to do and actually follow it through. But I just loved the ocean. I loved rock pooling. I loved exploring my local beaches and snorkeling in Brighton. And it was as a result of kind of all those experiences in my local ecosystem that I just wanted to go and learn more. And it was the perfect job where I could do what I'm passionate about.
Oh, that's awesome. And so lovely to figure that out so young. And I'm sure we'll have some people joining us today who already have a good idea about what they might want to do, or maybe inspired by your experience, which is lovely. A follow-up question from Westerings is, what's the biggest animal that you've seen and how did it make you feel?
Oh, the biggest animal I've seen in the ocean is a whale shark, which is the largest species of shark that we can get. And they are enormous and they're covered in the most beautiful spots. And the amazing thing about whale sharks is even though they are giant, they only eat plankton, which are tiny, tiny, or sometimes little fish as well, but really tiny species. So they're not aggressive at all and you can swim right next to them. But the other thing that's really cool about whale sharks is that their spot pattern on their back is unique to every shark. So kind of like how we all have fingerprints that are unique to us, they have spot patterns that are unique to them. And we can actually use technology that was designed for mapping the night sky stars to map the spots on the back of whale sharks, helping us to identify individuals and understand how they move around the world.
Wow, that's incredible. And there's so many species of sharks. And I think you said in the video that you've seen a great white shark. And what was it like? Was it gentle, or was it this scary creature that everyone kind of makes it out to be?
I love great white sharks because they are unapologetically sharks. They're very, very sharky. They've got big teeth and they swim really fast and they have a big presence in the water. I was actually working inside a cage. So we have special shark cages we put into the water. And the reason I was working in a cage is because I was doing photography. So I wanted to be able to focus on my camera so that I could get the perfect shots and not be constantly worrying about if there was a shark behind me. So sometimes some of my friends, they actually work outside of the cage with great whites. And actually, when you're interacting with them respectfully, they are also just as respectful. So I've never been in the water with a great white shark where I felt like they were threatening. But that being said, they are an apex predator. They've been around for millions and millions of years, and they're the top predator for a reason. So you have to keep your wits about you. It is still a great white shark in the end.
Amazing. So you started scuba diving very young. What was it that you first saw that made you so interested in marine biology?
So for me, it was a shark, surprisingly. I was snorkeling with my dad. So not so much scuba diving yet, but there was a shark that suddenly raced past us. And I remember my dad turning to me and going, "Swim faster, you're going to miss it." And instantly he made something that could have been quite a scary experience into this moment that was full of wonder and excitement. And he made sharks into something that was really special, that we're privileged to encounter rather than the scary thing that we share the oceans with. And in that moment, my curiosity around sharks grew. I knew that they were something that I should feel privileged to be in the same water with. And as a result, I think I've been chasing sharks ever since.
Brilliant. I've got another question here from another school, and this is sort of coming back to that point you made about how you had these great ocean experiences, but for many of those, you've seen the impact of plastic pollution. And they want to know how many times you've seen sea creatures stuck in nets or being affected by plastic.
Yeah, actually, just last month I was in California and we were whale watching and we saw a big school of humpback whales, which was so exciting. But one of the humpbacks was completely entangled in fishing net and you could see it being dragged backwards. And we put a drone up to be able to film from the air. And you could see meters and meters of fishing line that were wrapped around his tail, slowing him down. And luckily, where he was, it was inside a marine park, which is somewhere where really he shouldn't be getting entangled in fishing gear because it is a marine park. But it also means that it is really well protected and has a really fantastic team ready and on hand to assist in those situations. So we were able to call NOAA, which is the entanglement team. They were able to come out and deal with the entangled whale. So I wasn't actually there when it finally got detangled, but it was great to be able to kind of pass that information on to someone else to come and deal with that situation. And then myself, I've spent hours and hours cutting fishing net off of reefs. I think it's something that we see quite a lot of the time. And it can be that really kind of thin, clear wire that's so hard to spot. And once you find it and you see the coral starting to grow around it, and it goes on and on and on. And that can create a huge risk to marine life that could be entangled.
It's such a shame that this beautiful environment is having this issue with plastic. And I guess a question that I'd love to ask is, if every person could do just one thing to help protect the ocean from plastic pollution, what change would you like to see?
Ultimately, it's about reducing the amount of single-use plastics that we're using. I think that if we can find ways that we can reuse things that we already have, if we can stop how much we're purchasing to be able to just not be contributing to the amount of plastic we're putting into the environment that could eventually go into the ocean, that makes a big difference. But in terms of one single thing we can do, I think reusable shopping bags are a great change that you can all make. It's so easy to be out in town and then to buy something and then it gets given to you in a plastic bag. And if you buy something and you don't have a bag with you, there's no way of getting it home unless you take the bag. So always having one of those cloth bags in your backpack or in your pocket is a great way to just make sure that you always can avoid single-use plastics when you are out and about. And they're easy to make as well. You can make them from an old t-shirt really easily.
Brilliant. So I've got some more school questions here. What is the rarest species that you've seen in the water? Great question.
Oh, that is a great question. I've done a lot of work with great hammerhead sharks. So not like the scalloped hammerheads that we saw in the Pacific Ocean. These ones were in the Caribbean, and great hammerheads are enormous, but they're also critically endangered. So that was a really special moment being able to work with them.
That's lovely. And actually following on from that, another question, and it seems like you're a big fan of sharks. So someone wants to know, what is your favorite shark?
Oh, my favorite's the great white, without a doubt.
Amazing.
It's so special.
So another question here then. So what's the impact of your job and how does it help the ocean?
Yeah, so my job is I mainly work as a wildlife filmmaker. So my job is to work with all different marine biologists around the world to find out about new behaviors, what the issues our oceans are currently facing, and then to make documentaries that we can then use to educate the general public about those issues and about these amazing things that happen in our oceans. Because if we can share with people how incredible our oceans are, then they'll care about them, they'll want to protect them. And by creating a format that allows that science to be something that the general public can understand, it means that we create more and more ocean advocates.
Yeah, it's amazing to see the videos that you create and the beautiful footage that you capture of this incredible world that most of us never get a chance to actually see otherwise. So it's lovely. We've got a question about your work, and it's all these incredible species that you're talking about. How far do you have to travel to find them and to be able to see these in the wild?
So the amazing thing about the ocean is that it comes right to our doorstep, especially here in the UK. There's amazing marine life that you can see right here. I've dived with blue sharks in Cornwall, and it's some of the best diving that I've ever done. I've also dived with grey seals all up and down the UK coast, and they're amazing. So you can have absolutely fantastic wildlife encounters without ever leaving your home country. But some of the locations I have to go to are incredibly remote. So I also did a lot of work in Antarctica. And on one of those shoots, I spent 3 weeks traveling to spend 7 days actually working with the species you went to film.
Wow.
And that's just because it's such a remote place. And quite often, actually, the places that we have the most amazing and biodiverse wildlife are the furthest places away from human civilization. And that means that we have to spend a really long time getting there.
What were you filming out in Antarctica?
I was filming penguins.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
So if students are feeling inspired by your amazing ocean career, how did you get started and what advice would you give to them?
Getting started, I think, is just learning as much as you can about your local environment and starting to advocate for it. And that can be in the form of sharing what you've learned with your friends and your family, giving talks, or taking a camera phone and going out and filming your own documentaries about the amazing things that you've seen in your local area and sharing them with your classmates back in school. I think that's a great way to start to understand storytelling and the importance of sharing your local ecosystems. And then for me, I actually went down a more academic route. So I went on to study marine biology at university, and then I did a master's in wildlife filmmaking to eventually become a wildlife filmmaker.
Amazing. We've got another question here from Spalding St Paul's Primary School, the Eco Bees, and they want to know, what does a day in the life of a marine biologist look like? That's a great question.
So the day in the life of a marine biologist can look all sorts of different ways, depending on what you're specializing in. For some people, it can be a lot of sitting in a lab and looking at tiny little microscopic species that you can only see down a microscope. From a single drop of water, you can find hundreds and hundreds of species hidden away in those water droplets. Or it could mean running around the ocean, tagging giant sharks and monitoring where they're moving using satellite data. So it really depends on what part of the ocean that you want to work in. For me, because I sit in the marine biology, filmmaking, science communication space, my days change constantly. So I have some days where all I'm doing is I'm on the phone speaking to scientists, working in spreadsheets, looking at costs and doing lots of writing. And it almost feels like an office job. And then the next day, I'm learning how to drive a submarine and filming in the bottom of Antarctica. So there's all sorts of variation. And it's hard to say that it looks just one way, but that's the thing that I love about it, is that every single day can be completely unique.
That's amazing. Thank you so much to everybody for all of your super interesting questions. And thank you, Inka, for the great answers. I feel like I've learned a lot, and hopefully we've got lots of people feeling very inspired for the rest of their day of action. I think the next part of the day is to investigate plastic waste in schools. So hopefully you can go and see whether any of those types of plastic that Inka's talked about seeing in the ocean are in your school, and perhaps take some action to reduce them. So have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much, Inka. Thank you so much, everybody. And hopefully see you again soon.
Thanks for all the questions.